Hi, everyone. It is New Jersey's Lieutenant Governor and Secretary of State, Tahesha Way. And for the DOS Way October episode, it is National Archives Month. And that is why I am so excited. We have two special guests who are essential to archival work. Joining me today with us is Ronnie Calder. How are you doing, Ronnie?
Good. How are you?
That's right. Ronnie I'm doing well, is the Supervising Archivist at the New Jersey State Archives. And we cannot wait to learn more about all the good work that you and your team do there. And to my right, I have Nicholas
Ciotola,
who is the Curator of Cultural History at the New Jersey State Museum. Thank you, Nicholas. See you so many times and you just helped me out. So welcome.
Everybody calls me Nick C at the State Museum. So
exactly. That's what I'm so used to. And we're going to get right to it. Okay, Ronnie. Can you just briefly tell us about the State Archives and what is the mission and why is it so important?
So the New Jersey State Archives, we take all the government records that have been deemed permanent by their retention schedule or historically significant, and we organize those records and then make them accessible to the public.
Could you just describe a little bit more as to how is the process of deeming them historical in nature?
There's a state records committee for the ones that are deemed permanent, and they decide which records should stick around for all of time and which ones we don't necessarily need to reference later on. And then the ones that are deemed historically significant, on their schedules, they'll be like a no, the archives might want to look at these. So we'll go through them and decide whether or not we think that genealogists or future historians would find these of interest in their projects in the future.
Well, thank you for that. You know, when I became Secretary of State in 2018, which just seems like yesterday in archival history, if you will, one of the archival documents that I was able to see and witness was the history of voters. So that was phenomenal. And I really, impress upon New Jerseyans to take a moment and come and visit the archives. Now, you have a special role there as supervising archivist. Can you tell us about your job?
It's kind of a jack of all trades, so to speak, a little bit of everything. But essentially, it kind of boils down to like a deputy position to the director of the State Archives. Oh. So the director of the State Archives, Joseph Klett, he runs the show, basically, but I help manage the day-to-day operations of the archives and take on special projects like the upcoming 250th or any other projects that we get involved with.
Okay, so what is your typical day like? Come on, Ronnie, give it to us.
Lately, it's been, and I'm sure we'll get into this, it's been about the construction of the new exhibition gallery, getting the two exhibits for the 250th going on time, on schedule. Also, any problems that arise with our facilities or reference scheduling or supplies that people need. A lot of just overarching things just to make sure the archives can serve the public in a good manner.
Yeah, and speaking of serving the public, I, appreciate your role. It's special and unique, right? How many times, and I feel so humbled and blessed to actually have archivists with me, right? But how does our youth, right, get to enter these types of roles?
There are some programs that exist. So there was the New Jersey History Day program, where kids from middle schools and high schools were to do a research project, either a paper, a website, a play, a presentation, anything they wanted, an exhibit, a tabletop exhibit, but they had to use primary source documents. Oh. That was one of the requirements.
Okay.
So I've been involved with the program as one of the judges because it does like a regional competition, and they submit their project to the regional competition, and then they can qualify for state competition. So they get judged, they get feedback, and then they can take that back to them, and they're learning through the whole process and how to do research.
And that's why I was saying it piques their interest.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's good and even better. How would someone, if they want to pursue a role in your field, what process is it? What did you major in?
So to become an archivist,
exactly.
Yeah. So I majored, and a lot of archivists major in history as an undergraduate. They can essentially major in anything. It's the master's degree in library and information science that kind of can qualify them for an archivist role, because in the library program, there are archive-specific classes that they can take. So like records management, preservation, things of that sort. And then once they have that master's degree in library and information science, they can apply for archival jobs.
Love it. Okay, now, Nick C., turning to you. We all know what a museum is, right? But what is special about our state museum?
Well, the New Jersey State Museum, of course, is another agency of the Department of State. So we're a sister agency of the archives. We work hand in hand, really, in a lot of the things that we do.
Okay.
Our role is New Jersey, New Jersey's history. Let's celebrate this beautiful, wonderful state that we all live in. New Jersey has a lot of state pride, and there's no better way to celebrate state pride than to coming to your state museum in your capital city, Trenton, New Jersey, and seeing all the wonderful treasures of history, of science, of art, of archaeology that we have on display in the New Jersey State Museum, a state museum that's free and open to the public. Anyone can come to our museum any day of the week, except for Monday. We need to clean the artifacts at least one day out of the week and see all these wonderful treasures. So we're an educational institution. We inspire the youth of New Jersey, the youth of the country, through tangible, three-dimensional objects that tell stories about our history, about our past, so we can prepare for the future.
I love that. And speaking of the youth, there are programs right at the museum that goes on weekly.
Absolutely. We have, we're a multidisciplinary museum. So we have a history department. That's my department. But we also have a science department, an art department, an archaeology department, and an education department that offers programs every day of the week, on the weekends, for various age groups. We have, programs for school groups, elementary school kids that you'll see lined up on a weekday in spring in front of the State Museum, all excited to get out of school for a day so they can go and learn somewhere else. You learn a lot in school in New Jersey, but you can learn things outside of school, and field trips are still going on.
And thank you for that, Nick, because that's what's so beautiful about our State Museum. Not only the artifacts that you find, the paintings. My favorite will always be the dinosaur exhibit. I love it.
You're not alone.
I know. Everyone always speaks about the planetarium. Well, I'm like, no, you need to see the dinosaurs. But I do, really appreciate that it is also an educational experience. And I tell you, Nick, I'm going to ask you about what exactly does a curator do, but we might need you in my division of travel and tourism with all of the marketing you're giving for all the good assets that we have in New Jersey. So tell us about what exactly is a curator.
So a curator is similar to an archivist in many ways. An archivist handles paper records and documents. A curator handles three-dimensional objects. So a curator at a museum is the person that brings new objects into the museum, the things that are important that we need to preserve for posterity. Incidentally, the State Museum has 2.5 million objects and specimens in our collection. Not all in that building. We also have some off-site facilities where we store some of our materials. But a curator is the one that determines what should come into the collection, takes care of them, and then finds ways essentially to use those objects to do exhibitions and tell stories, whether it's a story about the dinosaurs that roamed New Jersey millions and millions of years ago, or as something as recent as an event that happened 50 years ago, which we'll talk about probably later today, the bicentennial of the United States that took place in just 50 years ago next year.
It's extraordinary. Now, what have you curated recently?
One of my most recent exhibits kind of encapsulates the story of what a curator does. A few years ago, I got a phone call, and an individual wanted to speak with the curator of the museum, and they found me, and I answered the phone. It was 2 days before the 4th of July, and the individual said, I have a couple of old photographs that I think the museum might be interested in. Well, as I do with all these calls, and I get many of these calls in the span of a week, a month, of a year, hundreds over the 16 years I've been with the state. And this one I knew was special. I returned the phone call, and it turned out that the individual didn't just have a couple of photographs. he had a collection of over 2,000 glass plate negatives, which is an old photographic technology. And each one of these glass plate negatives preserved an image of New Jersey at the turn of the 20th century.
Oh, my goodness.
He donated the collection to the museum, and we did an exhibition recently. The photographs were all taken by a previously unknown photographer from New Jersey named Grant Kastner, and they depict what life was like in our state at a turning point, really, in the history of the state, right? Think about the things that are happening at the turn of the 20th century, the transition from carriages to automobiles, the movement of African Americans from the South up into places like New Jersey, the stories of the bustling businesses that were taking part, the industries of New Jersey. Wow. He documented all of these things through his glass plate photographs. Those are now part of the State Museum collection. And we did a wonderful exhibition that was very well attended because it told stories of the everyday people of New Jersey. And that's what people want to learn about, right? Presidential history is important. The great leaders is important. But the stories of everyday people are equally important. And that was what we were able to do with that exhibition.
And is it still ongoing?
The unfortunate thing about the museum is that we have to constantly turn over exhibitions. So when we do changing exhibits, they're up for a short period of time, and then we need to rotate. Because as I said, we have so many different departments, so many stories to tell that nothing can live on in perpetuity. So that exhibit went away, but the collection didn't go away. We still have the photographs. We digitized all of them. So we have those images. And in the future, we can use them for other projects. We actually partnered recently with Rutgers University Press, and they've decided to do a book based on those photographs. So exhibits can often live on in other ways besides just being on view at the museum itself.
That's wonderful. And speaking about your collaboration with Rutgers, I know that there are true synergies within my division. So I want to just speak about how the archives and the museum have collaborated over the years. I don't know if Ronnie, Nick, who wants to take it?
Want to start?
Because there's so much going on.
We collaborated in the past on a couple of exhibitions. Since Nick's come on board for the last 16 years, he's used our collections frequently, which is great. So we've done the World War I. You had an exhibition on when the Centennial World War I happened, and you used our casualty cards to have images of soldiers from New Jersey who had died during the war, and you blew those up in the exhibit, and it was really striking. You have the Civil War flag gallery, and you've come to do research on soldiers using our Civil War collection, which we have a plethora of documents documenting service in the Civil War. Besides that, you had a map exhibit also. And so we used some of our early 1600, 1700 maps in that exhibit also, right?
Yeah. I mean, those are all projects that we did within the last, number of years. I think the reason that we work so well together is that, the archives is open to the public, and people come to the archives and they do research, and there's so many wonderful materials in the archives that people can learn about themselves. Museum doesn't really do that. What we do is we take those types of historical objects and we try to find ways to tell stories with them. And that's one of the things that we've done in concert with the archives. We can bring those documents to the public. The map exhibit is a good example. We took all these treasures from the archives, things that you wouldn't even see. They're held in a secret vault in this
our
building.
Safe in our vault, yeah.
And nobody ever gets to see them, except maybe you got to. But we got to bring those out and put them on display on the first floor in the museum. And when people came into that exhibit, I literally heard them just saying, wow, when they walked into the exhibit, because they saw these things and they knew they were special because they're displayed in a way. And you see them in the vault, they're, in a box or in paper, but we put them in frames and blow them up big on the walls, and we tell stories with them.
Yeah.
And the kids marveled at the fact that those maps showed that Trenton, where we are now, was part of Hunterdon County in the colonial period, right? They marveled at the fact that New Jersey, we think of New Jersey today as as having divisions, but mainly between North and South, right? Whoever's a Jets fan versus whoever's a Philadelphia Eagles fan, right?
You mean a Giants?
I mean a Giants fan.
That's me.
Well, I
can't forget my blue here.
I get to avoid that question because I'm a Steelers fan. So but
that's a different show. Okay, that's a different show, Nick.
But the maps allowed us to show people how historically it wasn't New Jersey. Right. It was the two Jerseys. There was a line down the middle between East and West. So I think that's how we work together. We tell stories using the beautiful objects that you have.
And so what are your popular resources?
I would say about 75 to 80% of the people that walk in the archives are genealogists. They're interested in their family history. So we have birth, marriage, and death records, wills, naturalizations, land records. The births we have from 1848 to 1924, so 100 years or older, because birth, marriage, and deaths weren't mandated by the state until 1848. So before then, you'd have to go through church records. Marriage records we have from 1848, marriage and deaths records we have from 1848 to 1950. So we have a lot of people coming in for, say, dual citizenship, or they want to know about their family, or things of that nature. We have some people doing historic home research, so they're looking through land records to see who owned the property. That's a lot of the people that come in. And then you have people who are doing historical research, people like Nick, or people doing archaeological digs or things like that. They're looking at maps or Supreme Court case files, military records, things of that nature, to develop the story around their project and what they're looking for. That's the most fulfilling thing about the job, is helping people find that document or that map or that photograph that means something to their project, which then means something to them. Like you're helping them find the hidden treasure that they need to complete their project.
Yeah, again, when I first started and I toured the archives, I, felt joy because I saw the visitors with the microfilm. I said, oh my goodness, this is just like being in school back in the day. I was very happy about that. But I was told by the director, Joe Collette, hi Joe, that the majority of everyone who was lined up, to your point, Ronnie, they were researching their family's genealogy. Yep. And he said that is one of the major resources that they come to see and witness and research. Now, what about at the museum? What's popular?
Well,
besides the dinosaurs,
as you mentioned, the dinosaurs are very popular. And before I came to the state of New Jersey, I worked just in a history museum, so I was surrounded with historians. All we did was U.S. history, essentially. But I think one of the great things about the State Museum is that fact that we are so multidisciplinary. We have so many different things. So the school groups that come in to see the dinosaurs, they do get to see the rest of the museum as part of the trip, right? So will go into the art gallery and they'll marvel at all the beautiful works of art. And they'll go to our history gallery and they'll learn these unknown stories of New Jersey history. When you walk into the third floor of the State Museum, that's our long-term cultural history gallery, you'll see all these wonderful things that were made in New Jersey and tell stories about New Jersey's history. One of the most striking ones is a massive porcelain ceramic urn that was made in New Jersey, and hand painted on the front of it is a scene of George Washington crossing the Delaware River. And that artifact, because it's so big and so striking and is right in the middle of the gallery, captures people's attention because it tells two stories. It tells the story of how Trenton and New Jersey was a big manufacturer of ceramics at one time, a story that's largely been forgotten, but it also tells that story that all school kids, whether they live in Montana or Missouri, of George Washington crossing the Delaware in Christmas night, 1776, and turning the tide of the Revolutionary War. That happened right here in New Jersey. And that artifact tells that historical fact of New Jersey's past.
Exactly, definitely. This actually is a wonderful segue to our discussion on the semi-quincentennial and what efforts both of your respective departments are doing. I know that New Jersey indeed is the crossroads to the American Revolution. So I'll start with you, Nick, and you just describe what the museum's efforts are in programming.
Well,
there's a lot. We can be here all day.
There's a lot going on. I want to leave time for Ronnie. She's leading the charge on this endeavor. But the State Museum will have an exhibition that's going to open on President's Day weekend, February 14th of 2026. It's maybe we'll celebrate our love for New Jersey at the same time because it's Valentine's Day, right?
All right.
But
it's marketing. It's good marketing.
It's going to tell the story of the bicentennial. Because if we think about it, the I can't even say semi-quincentennial half the time, right? But that means the
That's why I sometimes say the semi-Q.
That's can I borrow that? Okay. But that celebrates the 250th anniversary. But 50 years ago, there was the bicentennial, which was very significant to people who lived through a period of time that I lived through, the 1970s. And we wanted to celebrate not history itself, the events that happened 250 years ago, but what did people do? What did New Jersey do 50 years ago during the bicentennial? And a lot of interesting things happened in New Jersey in the bicentennial. And we for this project, we used the bicentennial record collection. It's about 56 boxes or something here in the State Archives collection. So we went through that as our research material, and we found stories like Liberty State Park, which we all love and enjoy today, a bicentennial project. It was one of the hallmarks of that celebration. We found out that the term 10 crucial days, that's the term that historians use for that period from December 25th, 1776 to January 3rd, 1777, the period of Washington's crossing, the Battle of Trenton, the Battle of Princeton. We know that as the 10 crucial days today, but nobody realized that term came about not in the 1700s or the 1800s or even the early 1900s, but that was coined during the bicentennial by former Governor Brendan Byrne. So we're finding all these things, and we wanted, quite frankly, to pay homage to our state government, our officials, because you yourself are a great champion of culture and history of New Jersey. And we wanted to celebrate that that's been going on for many years. The bicentennial, the leaders of New Jersey during the bicentennial, just like the leaders today, are celebrating the history of this state.
And the one thing you had mentioned previously, which is so important, not only with semi-quincentennial, but bicentennial, is just the basic premise that we're telling the story of the regular people and what was going on the ground. So in terms of archives, what is the archivist doing in terms of the semi-quincentennial?
So we're the two major projects that we're handling are we're going to have an exhibit gallery for the first time in this building called Revolutionary Lives, Living the American Experiment Then and Now. It is a stationary version of the Historical Commission's traveling exhibit, but it will be supplemented with documents from the State Archives, one document from Rutgers, and objects from the Museum of the American Revolution, Red Bank Battlefield, and Middlesex County History Division. That exhibit goes through the everyday lives of people during the Revolutionary War and their story, and then how those can relate to stories from today. So there'll also be an interactive during that exhibit to show you what revolutionary you are. So you take a quiz, and it'll be a great thing for us to have our own exhibit space. In the future, it will also have an inner room that will have the Bill of Rights, the ratification of the United States Constitution, and New Jersey's 1776 state constitution. But that won't happen until 2027, those three documents, because first they will be at the State Museum. That is the second exhibition that we're doing. So that exhibit, which is entitled The Power of Change, Revolutionary Stories from the New Jersey State Archives, it basically will showcase documents from the New Jersey State Archives as well as some other outside institutions, but it'll go through how the founders of the country and New Jersey instilled revolutionary ideals in the documents, and then how we've adapted those documents and because of society changes, and how they continue to live on today in new documents that were inspired by the documents from back then.
All of this is so exciting. right? And the good thing about it is that it's not only going to be, let's say, 2025 at the end of this year up into 2026, but again, 2027 and beyond, just to keep the learning, right, of the great history of New Jersey, the appreciation of our people going. So, Ronnie, tell us, how can folk find your office online to get more information?
So we have a website, nj.gov/state/archives. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and I believe X also.
Okay, and you, Nick, where can we find the museum?
Just Google New Jersey State Museum and you'll find us. But we're on the major social media networks as well. Go to the Department of State website and you can see a drop-down menu of all the agencies, cultural agencies of the Department of State. Yeah.
Well, I think both of you, this has been a phenomenal show, just speaking about how history and art can come together. And, we hope that you join us in the next episode of the DOS Way. Thank you so much.